In today's video, we are going to be talking all about bookkeeper cleanups. This is a fairly common thing in the bookkeeper world. You get a new client and their books are just a mess, there's tons of mistakes, and you have to do what we call a cleanup. This is going to be a jam-packed video, so on the screen are all the things I'm going to talk about. I'm going to make chapter titles too if you are looking for a specific question. But what is the cause of a cleanup? Why do they even happen? I'm going to help you determine the time frame. So what chunk of time do you need to make sure is perfect? How long does it take? How much to charge? What documents do you need? How to find the issues and then how to work on fixing them. So after this video, hopefully it can give you the confidence to dive into a cleanup. It's going to be challenging sometimes and you're not going to always know what to do and you're going to learn on the job, but hopefully this is a good overview for you. If you don't know me, I'm Morgan from FinePoints.biz. I have a free masterclass and checklist for bookkeepers. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you are excited about this video, and I would love it if you give it a thumbs up. Number one, what is the cause? Like, why do we need to do cleanups? And with a lot of these, there's not one answer to these questions. It's partially why I haven't made this video yet, because it was like hard to encompass everything that I wanted to say in every situation. So basically, someone has been in your client's QuickBooks file and doing things wrong. So oftentimes it is the owner. Maybe they started their business, they were good at the books at the beginning, and then their business got more complicated and they didn't know how to do certain things. Maybe they tried to do invoicing, but they didn't know how to apply payments. Maybe they didn't know how to use undeposited funds. Or it could just be that the books have gotten neglected for a long time. Maybe they had a good bookkeeper at one point and then that person had to move on and no one's been, keeping up on things. But basically, if there's a bunch of mistakes, I would consider that a cleanup. And I do have a video coming out next week that's related but slightly different. So that is about catching up books. So that's more of a client who has just gotten behind on their books. Maybe there's not a ton of mistakes, but you just need to catch up on the last year or so. And it's probably a little more straightforward. So definitely subscribe if you want to see that video next week. All right, number two, determine the time frame that you need to fix. And so this is going to be important to do first because it will determine how long it's going to take and how much you're going to charge the client. So oftentimes the client will know the year that they want updated. So it could be the current year or possibly the previous year. So right now it's September. It would not be unusual if I got a new client that they say, oh, we haven't filed our taxes yet. We got an extension for 2021, which is last year. So I need to fix all of 2021 and then 2022 to get current. So if the client has more historical data beyond 2021, beyond the last year, then it usually depends on if they have filed their taxes. So if they've already filed taxes like in 2018, 2019, 2020, and they just haven't done last year, 2021, then even if the books are messed up in those other years, 2018 and 19 and 20, then I would not worry about fixing those, especially right off the bat. So you want clean books starting the year that they need to file taxes. And I want you to really think about this. In some cases, it might make more sense to start over and start a fresh set of books. So in that example I just used, if there is a ton of junk in 2018, 19, and 20, and it's messing up your current books, it's messing up the years that you want to fix, then you can talk to your client about if it makes more sense for them to just start fresh. It's possible that it will take you less time to start fresh, so it won't be as high of a cost for the client. But in some cases, they might want that historical data. They might want all the financial data from those other years just for their own record keeping, or there could be some reason that they need that data from 2018, 19, and 2020, even though they've already filed taxes. Maybe they have to report to a board or a bank or something, and it could be that they want to keep that data. So talk with your client about that. See what makes the most sense and what is going to be the most efficient. The other thing that is going to give you a really good clue to the scope of this project is when were the books last reconciled. So you can go to the reconciliation reports, see when it was last reconciled, maybe double check that with the bank statements and make sure nothing has changed since it was reconciled. I'll talk about the documents you need just a little later. But in theory, if the books were reconciled, that should be a good starting place to the last time the bank matched QuickBooks. All right, how long is this going to take you to do this cleanup? This is the difficult question that everyone wants to know. You want to know, the client wants to know. In my personal experience, a cleanup has usually taken me from 10 hours to maybe 30 hours. And so of course, depending on how many hours I'm working per week, so we can usually get things cleaned up within a month of the time that I start working for a client. But of course, this is going to widely vary depending on a number of things. All right, so it is going to vary depending on how many years you are cleaning up. That is what I talked about earlier in number 2. It's going to matter how many accounts they have. Do they have a lot of bank accounts? Do they have credit card accounts? Do they use PayPal? What accounts are you fixing? And it depends how many transactions they have per month. So is your client only doing like 20 things coming through the bank, or is it hundreds of things coming through the bank? I do have a video you might find helpful that I talk about small, medium, and large clients and how much kind of I charge per month for those different sizes. And I think I go into transactions there as well. The thumbnail looks like this, and you can check that out after you watch this video. All right, so all that being said, I would say kind of just a general ballpark. For a client that's kind of on the smaller side, I would say you can kind of estimate somewhere around like an hour per month that you are fixing. So if you're doing a year, you can say it'll take about 12 hours for you to fix it. Don't forget about some of that like admin time, so times that you're communicating with your client, you're emailing them, you're talking with them on the phone about problems, about questions. And of course, the more problems you're fixing, the longer it's going to take. Obviously, bigger clients might be more like 2 hours per month or even more than that. How much should you charge? Another challenging question. So there's a lot of different ways that you can charge your client. I'll start by talking about probably one of the more simple ways and the ways that I did it when I was first starting out, and that is just to charge by the hour. So as a bookkeeper, you want to have kind of like an average hourly rate you want to be making, even if you are charging a fixed rate. I talk more about pricing in general in this video right there. You can watch that next. So say you're charging like $70 an hour. You start working on the client's books. And then what I have done in the past was like, I'm going to check in with you after 5 hours. I'm going to tell you how far I've gotten. I'm going to tell you questions, and then I would have probably a better idea of how long the rest of the project will take. You can talk about some of those ballpark numbers that I talked about in the previous one, number 3. But if other pricing methods seem really overwhelming to you, charging by the hour is completely fine. Another resource for you guys that has really great information about cleanups is Veronica Wasik. She has a YouTube channel called 5-Minute Bookkeeping, and I'll talk about a couple of her courses that you might want to take if you're doing cleanups. So she does have a free checklist that I'll talk about in the next section. But for pricing, what she recommends is doing something that she calls a paid diagnostic review. So this means looking at your client's books and reviewing them and diagnosing the problems, and then coming to your client with a dollar amount. So this is how much it's going to cost. It's going to cost you $2,000 to clean up all of your books to the present day. This is a screenshot of that class and the price as of today in 2022. And if you guys decide to take any of her classes, I would love it if you use my links, which are in the description box. That helps support my channel with no extra cost to you. I'll also leave her YouTube playlist linked down below that talks all about cleanups. So Veronica has a couple tips in there. One is to use a price range. So kind of do like a general ballpark amount. And give it as a range to your client. So say you think it's going to take you 20 hours to do cleanup, you charge $70 an hour, so that's $1,400. And so maybe you tell your client the range will be from $1,400 to $2,000. So that way it does give you a little wiggle room in case you come across some unexpected problems. And Veronica says she has gotten so confident she is able to just give her client a fixed amount. She's really good at diagnosing. And then she does recommend that you always get at least 50% upfront before you do the work. So that is a really great idea, especially depending on how well you know the client. And one other kind of problem that I have come across in pricing is this. So say on a normal basis, you would charge a client just for ongoing work like $200 per month. So every month it's $200, right? So in the course of a year, they would be paying you $2,400 for bookkeeping services, which I think is a perfectly reasonable amount. Because if they had an employee in there doing that, they would probably be paying a lot more. So remember that $2,400 number. Sometimes a cleanup can actually take less time than just monthly bookkeeping because you're mass categorizing transactions. So say this cleanup takes you 10 hours to do the whole year, and you're charging $70 an hour. That's only $700. So in your client's mind, they're like, oh, I don't want to pay this ongoing fixed rate every month to have up-to-date bookkeeping. I'm just going to wait and scramble at the end of the year because I can kind of get a better deal. I can just pay $700. So that scenario is definitely an argument for more of a fixed value pricing. So how much value is it worth for your client to have updated, cleaned books. It's probably worth a lot to them. It's probably worth that $2,400. So as you're charging a client for this, make sure you are thinking through some of those things. All right, and next, what documents do you need for a cleanup? You need access to their QuickBooks Online. As a bookkeeper, I work exclusively on QuickBooks Online. If you use a different software, obviously you'll need access to that. Bank statements are super helpful anytime you can get, especially electronic bank statements, or also a guest login to their bank if their bank will allow it, and you could get statements that way. If they have a tax return, that could be helpful. I don't think it's essential. And same with if you want to make contact with their tax preparer, that could also help you out as well. Just so you make sure that when you're cleaning up and categorizing, you're doing it in the way that their tax preparer wants, and some questions might come up along the way. All right, number 6 is familiarize yourself with the issue. So you have access to their QuickBooks, you're able to get in there and see what is going wrong and why this cleanup is needed. So the first thing I do is just kind of start poking around. So I would pull a profit and loss, look at a balance sheet, go into the bank feeds tab, see if there's a bunch of stuff waiting, as well as the register. You can check to see when the last time things were reconciled. So start poking around. If you pull a profit and loss and there's really huge balances in certain things that you know there shouldn't be. So maybe their rent is $1,000 a month, but instead of being $12,000 at the end of the year, it's like, $30,000 or something. That's a clue that you know something incorrect got put into that account. So look around for anything like that that's weird, maybe negative balances when there should be a positive balance, things like that. Click into some of those categories. See if there are things that look like personal expenses that are mixed in with those business expenses. That can be a really bad problem for some clients. So if it looks like, their gym membership is in there, like their hair salon, like all these things that aren't business related, that is a problem that you're going to need to sort out. Look at the balance sheet, see what the opening balances are, how much cash it says are in the bank accounts. Look into the equity accounts, see if they're taking owner's draws depending on their business structure. See if they're writing invoices, seeing if they're applying payments to those invoices. See if they're writing checks. Just look around at all the section of QuickBooks that you know about. Kind of get a feel for what they've been doing, maybe where they've been going wrong, and kind of the scope of what you're going to need to be fixing. So again, I'm going to direct you to Veronica. She has a free checklist that you can get started. This is what the icon looks like when you click on it within her website. And then this is just a really quick screenshot of some of the things that are on it, but definitely go download that from her. And then she also has a paid checklist that is much more in depth. So this is what the icon looks like if you want to go get that. So once you've figured out a lot of where those issues are, it's time for number 7, get started. All right, and this is a time where I can't totally help you, handhold you through the process because of course it's going to be different for every single client. But I do have a couple tips for you as you're going through the process. So first of all, just try to tackle one thing at a time. First just work on the undeposited funds if that's a problem. Then you can move on to things that are miscategorized or the personal expenses mixed with business expenses. So find a place where the QuickBooks account matches the bank account, and that is a good place to start. If you did decide to disregard some years, like not worry about 2019, sometimes you can kind of force that to match by making a journal entry to get that starting balance to be correct. I also tend to use, I think they would be called like dummy accounts. Like I'll make an account if I want to sort things. So maybe there's a bunch of personal expenses that I want to ask the client about. So you can use that Ask My Accountant function I talk about a lot. You can drop things into that and then just send them that report. Or if you want to sort things even more, you can just create accounts in the chart of accounts. Another tip is that check images are going to be helpful. So if you have a lot of checks and you can't figure out what they are, a lot of banks, you can log into the bank and find the check images, or possibly they are on the statement. Sometimes your client will also have like a paper ledger copy of checks. So if you're able to obtain that in like physical form, that is great too. So my process in this would be start with January of whatever year that you are completing and get January reconciled. I know that's easy to say, but harder to do. But my point is start with 1 month chunk instead of looking at the whole year altogether. So once you figure out all of the problems and fix them all within 1 month, then go ahead and reconcile January. And so be like, okay, good, like check mark, that one is done. And then you can go on to February, March. And at some point, if you kind of get on a roll, it might be more efficient for you to do multiple months at once. And the reason I think that is because, if you have the same vendor like a bunch of times, then it's going to be quicker just to, say it's AT&T for their cell phone, and say there's like 100 of AT&Ts within the whole year, it's quicker to just categorize all those at once to AT&T. So use your best judgment as to how many problems you're seeing, and if you want to change the chunks of time that you are fixing to either, smaller chunks or larger chunks. And Veronica Wasik, again, does have a class. It's called Complete QBO Cleanup System. The price as of today is $797. This is what the icon looks like. So if you're someone that wants to be a bookkeeper for a while, I would really recommend just learning this stuff like in and out and getting her systems, because she knows what she's doing for real. And when I did chat with her a couple months ago, she said her most popular class is actually a bundle of those two things that I was talking about. So it's the paid diagnostic review, so diagnosing the person's books and figure out how much it's going to cost, and then the complete QBO cleanup system. So if you do buy those two together as a bundle, I think you get a bit of a discount. And again, I would love it if you use my affiliate links, which are in the description. A common problem you might come across is undeposited funds. One of my very first clients had tons of stuff in undeposited funds. It's actually been a while since I've had a client that uses this, but if you make a bank deposit, you can put it in kind of like a holding area until it is realized by the bank. So what was happening is when things were coming into the bank, it was getting into QuickBooks, but then those funds were still kind of waiting in that holding area. So they were kind of like in there twice. And so I was able to match as many of them as I could. But this is kind of like a little bit of like a bookkeeper controversy. There's different mindsets if you ask bookkeepers how to deal with this type of thing. So some bookkeepers are like, no, you need to match every single transaction perfectly, and no matter what, we need to take all the time in the world and get this perfect. And there's other people who want the end goal to be perfect. And of course, the bank is going to reconcile, everything is going to match at the end, but they don't necessarily see the value in matching every single old transaction perfectly. And I don't know, you can probably tell that I am more to the big picture efficient side of things versus the nitpicky make everything totally perfect side of things. So tell me in the comments which you are, and if you're horrified by certain things I say, or if you're more into the let's make it efficient. There is a cost to the client. So I feel like in a way I'm serving my client better by picking and choosing the big picture items. So circling back to how this relates to undeposited funds. So at some point, once I matched all of the undeposited funds I could, there was kind of a chunk still sitting there, and I got some advice at the time, and what I was able to do is make a journal entry to kind of zero out that balance. And yes, everything's still reconciled because remember I said they were in there twice. So the transactions were still on the register, they were totally in QuickBooks, but they weren't in there like best practice perfectly how they would be if we were doing it in real time. And just a couple of my personal thoughts on cleanups. So I have done a lot of cleanups, and it's kind of inevitable. I think you're gonna come across cleanups as a bookkeeper. But for me, they're not my favorite thing to do. I don't enjoy them. I don't enjoy the not knowing. My preference and sweet spot is knowing what I'm doing it really fast and really efficiently. So that is what I enjoy. And as a bookkeeper, you do have the flexibility to choose the type of clients you want. And if there was like a really great client that I really wanted to work with, I probably would be able to get through the cleanup process to get, to the part that I liked. But someone like Veronica, she has a really good system for cleanups. She can bring in a lot of business with that. That's just not something I personally enjoy. And I've also kind of found it hard to charge what I know it's worth because it does have a lot of value to people. And it's kind of their own fault if they weren't paying attention to their books for a while. They should have like a monetary consequence based on, their neglect. But I always feel kind of bad. So I'm like, oh, I'll just charge you like, not really what it's worth. So that's my own issue. But just a note that if you like cleanups, you can totally make that your thing. If you don't like them, you can avoid them to some degree. Okay, I think this is one of my longest videos ever, but I really just wanted to get all of the information for you guys in one place. Definitely let me know in the comments what other videos you would like to see. Let me know if you have interacted with Veronica or taken any of her classes or seen her YouTube channel, what you think of her. I just have a ton of respect for her in her organization and her teaching style. So definitely show her some love by using my links. Of course, I'm not trying to sell you something if you don't need it, but if you think her classes will be helpful, she really is kind of like the guru in this area. Don't forget to subscribe because next week kind of takes off where this left off. So if you get a new client, where to start. So assuming that everything's cleaned up and looking good, where do you start with a new client? You also might like the video that is one client from start to finish. So it talks about onboarding all the way to sending monthly reports. So I will link that in the description box as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again next week.